Welcome to the Mentor Podcast, where the most highly motivated entrepreneurs come to get their weekly dose of financial stability with host Ron LeGrand, as well as other nationally recognized thought leaders who will teach you how to get, grow, and protect your wealth.
Well, hello again. This is Ron LeGrand with another issue of the Mentor Podcast. And today I am interviewing myself. It should be quite an interesting interview. The subject is going to be mastering the phone. And mastering the phone means the closing call to the seller after, hopefully, our VA has filled out the property information sheet and gotten it to you. Now, I know I got people listening today have no idea what I'm talking about, so I got to do a little bit of preliminary teaching to make sure everybody understands why the phone is so important, why is it so critical, and how we go about doing it, and how we go about asking the seller a few questions and get them to make us the offer. You see, we don't make offers in the pretty house or the terms business. The seller makes us the offer, and you're about to see why. So when I get through the material here, I'm going to have Deb on here, and she's going to act like a real seller, and I'm going to make a pretend closing call, and you'll see how it goes by reading the scripts that we furnish, which makes it very easy to make this call because they're short scripts. But handling this call is critical, because if we don't get this call handled to determine whether the seller will work with us and take a monthly payment until we can pay them off, then obviously we're never going to get an appointment to go to the house or get a contract. So if we make a mess of the calls, we're not going to get any deals. So that's how critical they are to the terms business. And that's how important it is for you to learn how to handle these calls so you can make less calls and get more deals. No calls, no deals. Because it is true that most sellers want all cash and do not want to take a monthly payment until we pay them off. However, that's no big surprise, because I don't care what business you're in, you're always going to be dealing with the minority anyway, not the majority. I don't need all my sellers to be willing to take terms. I only need one or two a month, and that'll create an income stream that'll easily outdistance any job that anybody has listening right now to this podcast. So let's start with, well, what is this terms business thing? In fact, what is even the definition of terms? Well, there's two sides to our business. There's the ugly house business with properties that are terrible shape and need rehabbed. In that side of the business, we usually make all cash offers, and our exit strategy is either to wholesale it, quickly flip it to another investor and pick up 10 grand or more, or buy it and rehab it, and then sell it to a qualified buyer and cash out. If we are wholesaling, we never take title of the house. We just put it under contract and then flip the contract and get paid. So there's thousands of those deals going on every day all over America. In fact, that's how I made my first $3,000 check in 1982. However, if you're rehabbing, that means we have to buy it, and that means raising money through private lenders. We don't use mortgage brokers. We use private individuals, people who are not in the lending business. But that's another whole conversation, which I probably ought to even add to our podcast list, on how to approach people and get them a high rate of return safely, secured by a first mortgage closed with an attorney on this property at a low loan-to-value ratio, so that we can use the money to buy it and fix it. And then when I do that, I list them with a realtor and let them sell it, find the qualified buyer, and get it closed. However, that's the ugly house side of the business. And today we're going to talk about the pretty house side of the business, which is a totally different business. In the pretty house side of the business, our objective is to buy with terms so we can sell with terms. I'll give you an example in a minute, a deal I did recently. Because the seller is willing to take a monthly payment until we can pay them off in full, that means we can sell it or lease option it to a tenant buyer who will pay us a monthly rent until they can go qualify for a loan at the bank sometime in the future. Now, 70% of the marketplace out there that are looking to buy houses today cannot qualify at the bank. So they are all ours. They're not going to buy through a realtor, not going to buy through a builder, because they can't qualify, at least not now. Anybody that cannot qualify today can qualify in time with a little bit of work, cleaning up whatever is stopping them from qualifying. Sometimes that's credit, sometimes it's debt ratio, sometimes they can't prove the income. Whatever it is, can be fixed in time. So we acquire the property with terms, and in my case, I put a lease option tenant buyer in there for whatever long, couple of years usually. And then if they want to go get a loan, they can go get a loan. Or if they don't, they'll move. In my case, most of them move because I really don't do anything to force them to get qualified and exit out, because the truth is I really don't want them to exit out. And I don't have time to go into that in detail now, but honestly, the longer you own the house, the more money you're going to make. And there are no exceptions to that rule. So what we're going to create is money now from a non-refundable option deposit that the tenant buyer gives us, and that's measured in thousands, not hundreds, on beautiful houses in beautiful neighborhoods, which, by the way, are 90% of the houses on the market. There are many times more pretty ones than there are ugly ones. So when I can get sellers to sell those to me on terms, I'm immediately putting somebody in the house. I avoid all the costly entanglements. I got no rehabs. I got no committees. I got no bank loans. Nobody's pulling my credit. I absolutely do not need credit, and nobody's going to ask me to pull my credit report. When I buy with terms, I buy with a non-recourse, which means I'm not personally going to guarantee any debt, and no single-family house is worth doing that. It's the biggest mistake you can make is guaranteeing debt. So we don't have to guarantee debt, and most of them require no money or little money. Normally, when we buy these houses, we either put no down or very little down, but we usually do pay the closing cost. So the size of the closing cost, depending on where you live, is pretty much the money you're going to need for at least half of your deals. You'll see when I use my script here how we get these nothing down deals, how we get the seller to make us a nothing down offer. So when I buy them, I immediately put them on the market as a lease purchase to a tenant buyer, and it's clear in my ads that it's a lease purchase and no banks are needed and no credit is needed. And of course, that drives a thunderous herd of people in looking how they can get into a house without using their money or credit. Without using their credit or qualifying for a loan, because that's not what they're accustomed to hearing. So that opens up a lot of buyers, and selling these houses on terms is really easy. It's not about selling them. It's about picking the best qualified person that comes along. And the definition of qualified is not their credit. It's how much money they have to put down on a non-refundable deposit. Now, there's really only 3 kinds of terms. If you guys are listening, you might want to make notes on this, even though this will be posted and you play it back. Should be making notes if this is brand new to you. I'm either going to control the house from the seller with a lease with an option to buy, giving me total control of the house, but I don't own it yet. And then my goal is to sublease it to a tenant buyer until they cash me out or until my term ends with my seller. In order to do that, I'll still get that big upfront non-refundable deposit from the buyer, the same as I would if I owned the house. And then my next objective, of course, is to have my payment going out to the seller low enough to where I can get a considerably higher rent payment coming in from my buyer. And of course, that's called positive cash flow. And that, my friends, is what I teach my folks to work on, because that is called residual income. And the difference between what you collect and what you pay comes in every month for years into the future. And you don't have to get out of bed to make that income happen. Now, residual income is my favorite kind of income because, honestly, I do the job once and I keep getting paid for a long time in the future. Unlike flipping wholesale or rehabbing and retailing, where I get one check, I pay maximum taxes, and I got to go back to work and keep doing it or I don't have any money. When we can get sellers to give us terms, and then we can offer terms and create that monthly spread, pretty soon that residual income could easily outdistance one's normal income from working on a job or another profession. And then, of course, another payday is the difference between what I agree to pay the seller and what my buyer pays me when they do cash me out on the back end. That's called equity. I won't even buy a house unless I get some equity. I don't get a lot sometimes, because in the pretty house business, it's not about price like it is in the ugly house business. Sometimes we pay close to retail, but we get good terms. And you'll see why with my example in a minute, why terms are more important than price. On the other hand, I do want some equity, because when I sell this house, when I lease option it to a tenant buyer, I'm going to raise the price some, because when you offer anything on terms, it's worth more than when you offer the same thing on cash. And any appraiser will tell you that. So I get to raise the price a little. So I'm creating some equity over and above what I think the real value is. And plus the seller is going to give me some equity. So, I've got plenty of room to make tons of money here. So if I don't collect it all up front on the deposit, whatever's left, I'll get on the back end when they cash me out. And don't forget that every month that goes by, the debt goes down and I get the benefit of all that debt pay down as well. Now, of course, when a buyer gives me a big upfront deposit, that deposit is non-refundable. So if they do not buy the house and they move, they lose that deposit. And that is clearly pointed out in our agreements. And when they sign this in front of an attorney, it's pointed out again. So it's absolutely clear to them that this is a non-refundable deposit. Now, understand that deposit definitely has got to be attributed toward their down payment if they buy. So they get credit for it. So if they give me a $20,000 deposit, that's $20,000 less they have to bring to closing. And that goes toward their down payment. And of course, comes off of their total purchase price. But if they move, they lose that deposit. And by the way, when I put tenant buyers in a house, they are always responsible for the repairs. So they agree to do the repairs as a condition of their option. So I could lease option it from the seller. That's one way. Or I could buy it with owner financing, which simply means attorney closes the documents and creates a mortgage or a deed of trust back to the seller from my land trust who owns the property, making them a payment for some amount of term. Sometimes that payment is the same as their underlying loan, and sometimes they don't have any money coming later, or sometimes they do. Either way, he will create a wraparound mortgage or a wraparound deed of trust where my trust pays the seller pays their bank. And that's how I buy most of my properties, actually. But there's a third way, and that's called buying the property subject to the underlying loan. That's where the seller just signs a deed, signs a closing statement, and leaves, and in front of attorney. And there is no note where I owe the seller any money. They just give me the house and walk away. When I buy them subject to, that means I'm not assuming a loan. I'm not guaranteeing anything. I'm just taking over their debt and agree to pay it, whatever we agreed upon, however long I agree to pay it. And of course, my objective is to immediately put a tenant buyer in the house and collect a big non-refundable deposit from them. So all the times that I can get in with no down payment and I get out with $20,000, $30,000 from my buyer, that goes directly into my pocket. And incidentally, that is your money when you receive it. You don't have to put it in escrow. You're not a realtor. You don't have to bring it to closing. You just show it as a credit on the closing statement. And of course, that's acceptable. It's no different than if you put up a $1,000 deposit to buy a house through a realtor. That $1,000 deposit will come off of your down payment when you buy the house. Same here. So let me give you an example of a recent deal. This I should bring it very clear to you. $250,000 after repaired value. In other words, it was in excellent shape. So the house was worth $250,000, and they owed nothing on it. It's free and clear. Now they were asking $229,000 for the house, and I got them down to $220,000, and nothing down. They agreed to nothing down, on $1,200 a month payment on a 5-year term. I'll go over that again. The value was $250,000. Seller agreed to sell it for $220,000 with nothing down, $1,200 a month, 5-year term. So I immediately, it was 14 days it took me to put a tenant buyer in this house for $259,900. So I raised the price $9,900. That tenant buyer gave me a $25,000 non-refundable option deposit. And that means they owe me $235,900, and they agreed to pay $1,800 a month rent. So I am collecting every month the difference between the $1,200 going out and the $1,800 coming in. So that means $600 a month positive cash flow. Tenant buyer is doing any repairs, which was in excellent condition when I put them in it. Plus, I put nothing down to buy it, and I got $25,000 back from my buyer. That's $25,000 profit, less closing costs. Right there, within 14 days, that money was in my hand. And then, of course, if they cash me out in a not very distant future, I gave them a 2-year term. So if they cash me out, I get the difference between whatever's left between what I owe the seller and what my buyer owes me. And of course, if my buyer moves, I get to do it again, collect another $25,000 or whatever. So my objective here today is talking about mastering that phone call. So I'm not going to get any deeper in what terms are, but if you really want to understand this terms business, I've created an all-day seminar called Fast Track to Wealth that I personally deliver several times a year. And we now have that on the digital, so you can actually grab the whole day seminar, which I promise you, it'll be the best seminar you ever watched if you want to make the fastest and the easiest money in real estate. And here's the good news. It's only $99 to download this entire day. You can get that at thementorpodcast.com/FEW. FEW. Thementorpodcast.com/FEW. All right. So let's talk about the four. There's at least 10 mistakes that people make on the phone. I'm going to discuss 4 of them right now. And I'm really not going to have to be able to go into deep detail on those 4, but these are the 4 big ones, I think, and probably the most common mistakes people make when they're on the phone. Now, first of all, if you're using our virtual assistants, they are going to call the seller and fill out a property information sheet and get all the facts on the house before that sheet comes to you. That is, if you're using RVA. If you're not using RVA, then of course you'll have to make the call to the seller and fill out the sheet. Now, these sellers are online. There's multiple ways we find these sellers, but there's so many of them online. That's where most of my students start, right there. They're already posted online for sale by owner. So then either you call them or your RVA calls them. And either way, once you get the information on the house, now you've got to go to my script to find out if you're going to be able to work together or not. So when the VA is talking to the seller, they're asking them 2 questions. One is, would you sell for what you owe? And that is only if you got a small gap between the loan and the asking price. Don't want to ask that question at the wrong time, or you just tick off the seller. Because honestly, if there's a great big old gap between what they owe and what they want, that would be a foolish question. But the question we get a yes to mostly about time is, would you consider taking a monthly payment if we buy your house and pay you off in the future? And if the answer is yes to that, that's what we call a yes lead. Now, that doesn't mean it's a deal, but at least the sellers indicated they would consider discussing financing the house on a monthly payment until we can pay them off in the future. So when these leads come to you, they're either going to be a yes or they're going to be a no, because most of the sellers will say, no, I would not be interested in that. I want to cash out now. However, all of these leads should be called using my scripts, because there are 4 times more no leads than yes leads. And the reality is there's more deals in the no's than there are in the yeses. So I have a script to call them if they said no. And then I have a script to call them if they said yes. Both of them are very short. So if they said no, then it's up to you to read my script and show them all the reasons, the benefits of taking a monthly payment until we can pay them off. And sometimes they'll change their mind when they see, well, golly, I would come out better if I did that. So when you get this sheet in your hand, that's when you start making what we call the closing call. And that closing call is absolutely critical to your success in the terms business. Because if you don't master that call, you won't get any appointments, you won't get any deals. Fortunately, it's short scripts, but it does take some practice. I'm going to tell you that right up front. It takes practice. So here's the mistakes people make, at least 4 of them. Number 1, you beg. Now, you don't know you're begging. You don't feel like you're begging. You don't even think you sound like you're begging, but you're begging. If you talk too much, you're begging. And that's number 2, by the way. People talk too much. If you start delivering a seminar to show them how smart you are, you're begging. If you get off the script, you're begging. If you get lost, you're begging. If you fumble around trying to figure out what to say, you're begging. And it's obvious that you're begging, and it'll come across to the other side, and your credibility will not be at a very high level. When we make these calls, we have to control the conversation, practice so we are not begging, doesn't sound like we're begging, and get to the point. Because in order for us to determine whether we want to go to the house, we are going to ask the seller what terms that would be acceptable to them. And I'll do that here in a minute, because I'm going to make a practice call to Debbie, who's on the phone with me today. So number 1, you beg. Number 2, talk too much. Talk too much, talk, not getting to the point. And a lot of times that's just simply because you're stalling, trying to figure out what to say next. Or you don't have to do that if you're following a script. So our job on this call is to ask questions and let the seller make us an offer. Our job is not to make offers on the phone, not to make any promises on the phone, but only to find out where the seller's head is at to see if we have a reason to visit their house. And we have to get the questions answered that we need answered. And that's only 3 of them to make the decision as to whether we want to go to their house or not. So we're either going to get a yes or a no answer. Either way, they're going to get called. And if we don't get those answers, those $3 million questions, then we'll never know if it's a deal or not, and we'll never go to the house. And number 3 mistake is you sound like you're reading a script. If you sound like you're reading a script, it's obvious on the other side. Doesn't instill a lot of confidence in the other side if they can hear you reading a script. Now look, scripts are normal. Any company with people on the telephone is going to use scripts. On the other hand, when you're calling to order something off the TV, you know they're going to read a script, and you expect them to read a script. But that's not necessarily the case when you're trying to buy somebody's multi-$100,000 house and you're sitting there reading a script. So you have to practice till it doesn't sound like you're reading the script. Again, my scripts are short, but I don't want to hear you sound like you're reading them. Number 4, you talk too fast. One of the biggest mistakes people make when they start is they talk too fast, like I'm doing right now. Practice slowing down. Practice getting into a conversation. Practice being fun to talk to on the other end of the phone. Not like I'm reading a script, and not like I'm stale and unfriendly. Practice, practice, practice. Now, I instruct all my students to practice first. The property information sheets in front of you. Get somebody on the other side of the table. Practice making the calls and record them while you're doing it. And don't forget that part. Record the calls while you're practicing. And if you don't record them, this is all a wasted effort, because you cannot hear what your mistakes you're making while you're talking. You can when you play them back. Are you begging? Are you talking too fast? You sound like you're reading a script, and all the other mistakes that you can make. So practice, write down your mistakes and make some more calls, and keep practicing until you feel like you're as good as you're going to get. Then start calling sellers instead of wasting perfectly good leads. Now, I'm going to give you some resources here. Write these down, and then I'm going to get on a call with Debbie here. All right. I have an all-day seminar called Fast Track to Wealth. And honestly, if you're listening to this call, it frankly would be kind of foolish not to get this $99 seminar. You can get it at thementorpodcast.com/FEW. FEW. Frank Elizabeth William. Doesn't matter whether it's a lowercase or uppercase. That's a bargain. I can tell you that right now. Plus, you get a whole ton of bonuses with it, worth hundreds of dollars. And if you want to go and check into my 4-day event that I still teach called Quick Start Real Estate School, go check that out at thementorpodcast.com/quick. And you can see all about that 4-day event that we do once a month somewhere in the country, which is where you ultimately should wind up if you like what you're hearing here today, because that's where I train you how to do this business. And if you can't make it to the 4-day event, your next best choice is to get my terms course, where I spend 2 days going through the entire terms business at thementorpodcast.com/terms. thementorpodcast.com/terms. And by the way, if you do get that, then you will get credit toward the 4-day event when you decide to upgrade. All right. I'm going to make a call right now with Debbie. This is Debbie here. She's in our marketing department at Global. And we're going to pretend I'm the buyer. Debbie's the seller. So, Debbie, why don't we give them the details on this house we just made up? How about that?
Okay.
What's the R?
Okay. So $250,000.
Mm-hmm.
I owe $200,000. I'm asking $250,000.
Okay.
The house is in good shape, and the monthly payment is $1,780 a month.
Okay. All right. Now, if I'm calling Debbie on this house, that means I have a property information sheet in front of me generated by my VAs, and it's got all the other facts: bedrooms, bathrooms, square footage. Is it in great condition? Make sure it's not listed. When do you want to move? What do you owe on the house? What's the payment? And what do you think it's worth? And is it a house or is it a condo? And if it's a condo or a townhouse, what's the association dues and all that? Okay. So I have this sheet in front of me. And also, they have been asked, would you consider a monthly payment until we can pay you off in full? So let me start first by saying that that's a yes sheet. It comes in where the VA is checked off yes. And by the way, we get yeses somewhere between 18 and 30% of the time when we get the seller on the phone and fill out the sheet. So again, that doesn't mean it's a deal, but it does mean at least they would consider hearing about what all that means. All right, so I got the sheet in front of me, and now I'm calling Deb back, and I'm starting reading my script right here. Hi, Deb. This is Ron. You talked to my assistant about your house yesterday. Got a minute?
Yes, I sure do.
Okay. Listen, I've got all the information on the house here, so we don't need to go through all that again. My information says that you would consider taking a monthly payment until we could pay you off in full. Is that correct?
I would consider taking a payment. How much were you thinking?
Well, I don't know. That's we're gonna work on that right now, and I'll work on it more when we get out to the house. If the answer to the next three questions I ask you, it makes sense for both of us. All right.
Okay.
All right. Well, listen, if we do agree upon terms, what is the least you could take on price for the house?
Well, I'm asking the $250, so I would say I wouldn't want to go any lower than $235.
$235. Okay. So $235 is the best you can do?
I think that would probably be the lowest.
All right. Keep in mind now, if we work out the terms, Debbie, I'm going to be paying all the closing costs. There's no commission. I'm going to close whenever you're ready. I'm going to take the house as is. And I can tell you that the net you get is likely higher than any other way you sell it. So let's leave it at $235, and we'll deal with it when we get to the house. Okay?
Okay.
All right. Now we usually buy with nothing down. Okay?
Oh, okay.
Well, that was easy.
Well,
okay.
I'm listening. I'm taking it all in.
All right. Well, since our listeners don't believe anybody's going to say it's okay, go ahead and challenge me on it.
Right.
We usually buy with nothing down. Okay?
That would be pretty tough. I would feel like I'd have to get. I would need a down payment.
Okay. Well, then, how close to zero can you get?
Oh goodness. I wouldn't want to go lower than 15.
It's 15,000.
Yeah.
We usually buy them with nothing down. But as long as I know you're flexible, I'll work on that when I get to the house. But I can tell you right now, it's unlikely I'm gonna give you 15 down. All right. Let me go to the last question. Your payment is what'd you say, $1,700 a month?
Yes, $1,780.
Okay. Well, I assume it's okay if I just cover your payment until I pay you off in full, correct?
That would probably be okay, depending on the down.
98% of the sellers will say okay.
Okay.
And that's almost always the payment we make is what the seller is paying. All right. All right. Well, then a couple more questions. Are you the only owner of the house?
I am.
Okay. So your husband's not on title?
No.
Okay. All right. Then the last question. If I come out to your house and we can agree upon the terms, are you ready to sell the house now and get some paperwork done while I'm there?
Yes, I would be.
All right. Well, I'm out of questions. When do you think would be a good time for me to come see it?
Could come tomorrow.
We're going to make an appointment. Okay.
Okay.
So, folks listening, do you see how easy that script was that I just read to her? And remember, who made whom the offer? She told me she'd take $235. She told me she wants 15. I told her I'm not giving it to her. And she told me she'd be okay if I just covered her payment. Seller makes us the offer. We don't make them the offer. We ask questions. They answer our questions. So now, let's go back, Deb. And let's assuming I'm calling you and it says, no, you won't take terms on my property information sheet.
Okay.
Hi, Deb. This is Ron. Talked to my assistant the other day about the house you have for sale. You got a minute?
Yes.
Okay. Well, I've got all the information here, and you've indicated that you would not be interested in taking a payment until we can pay you off in full. Is that correct?
Yes, that's true.
All right. Well, listen, we hear that a lot. A lot of sellers want cash, and the only way they'll sell is to cash out. But actually, there are some very good reasons why you might want to consider taking terms, which I can go over with you in about 60 seconds, because we can buy your house and we can close when you're ready, and I pay all the closing costs. So, do you want to hear how we can do that?
Sure.
All right. Well, then there's a no script, which you'd read there, which is about 4 paragraphs long, and it goes into why I pay full price, whatever we agree upon, why I pay the closing costs or how I pay them, which is usually $7,000 in many states, how I can close when you're ready, which is a big deal to sellers because sometimes you're not ready to get out right away, and how we take it as is, which is also a big deal to some sellers. And then I make a point listen, the net you get is going to be likely the highest net you're ever going to get. And then I go on to explain what we do and why. Our whole business is about buying on terms from sellers who will take a monthly payment so that we can install quality people in the house and help them get qualified so they can cash us out. So literally, it's an all-cash sale. It's just a delayed all-cash sale. And it costs you nothing. You're never going to pay me a dime in commission. So really, all I need from you is an agreement to move forward, and we can close whenever you're ready, and then I'll start making payments when you and I agree. Does that sound interesting?
That sounds interesting.
Okay. Well, a lot of times they'll say, okay, and we'll move on to the 3 questions I just previously asked you, and we'll get it to a conclusion. So it's really very simple. If I get the answers I like, I'll make an appointment. If I don't get the answers I like, I won't. And that's all there is to that closing call, but it does have to be handled properly. All right. Well, Deb, looks like I'm going to be buying your house here shortly, so I appreciate it.
Sounds good to me.
Acting like a seller. Okay. Boy, we got a lot of stuff in here in this 30 minutes, but man, what we just discussed, folks, is absolutely critical because in the terms business, look, the least I'm going to take on a deposit is $20,000 because I'm not going to be dealing with the low-end junk houses. I'm going to be dealing with median and above, which is where I live, 250 to 2 million. And when you learn how to do this business without the risk, those big numbers won't scare you anymore, but you'll quickly learn the higher price I'm selling for, the bigger non-refundable deposit my tenant buyer is going to give me. So I want to go where the money is, especially if I can go there without risk. So anyway, I like to learn. If you're interested in terms business, again, you can get, I'll use all those links that I gave you. In fact, they'll be posted when this thing goes up on a recording, won't they, Deb?
Yes, they sure will. All the links will be there.
All right. Well, thank you for tuning in. I'll see you on the next Mentor Podcast.
That's all for this edition of the Mentor Podcast. To connect with Ron and learn how you can attain financial freedom, as well as up-to-date strategies to grow and protect your wealth based on today's discussion, go to www.connectwiththementor.com.